Hello, I'm Clyde Derrick, and I'm so grateful to join my excellent fellow writers today. And I'm grateful as well to Omnidawn's Rusty Keegan and Laura Joachimson for their incredible support. I'll be reading an excerpt from my novella, The Ghost Trio. The Ghost Trio is a ghost story, an historical story, and a love story, mostly told by Laurel Glessing, who shares her unusual life narrative, starting with childhood experiences and a mysterious red-headed man. This is in Laurel's voice. I had the most typically normal life a girl could have in the 1950s and 60s, growing up in the most placid town in America with the dearest and most benign family. Only I was not part of this pattern. I overheard my mother and father talking one day when I was 8 years old in the third grade. They thought no one could hear them, and my father expressed the concern that Laurel seems detached. My mother said with an ice cube in her voice that girl seems, and then she jumped into the word haunted. That made me smile and feel special, which I don't think was their intention. And looking back, I was absolutely haunted. It always felt to me, even as a young child, that my life at that time was not the beginning of something new that everyone thought it was. I knew that something else had come before, and at some point I would return to that something else, whatever it had been, if only to visit. We weren't a religious family, but like most families, we turned to the nearest available minister in a crisis when our inner resources failed us, and we had no quick answers. I'd seen the inside of the Lutheran Church for only a few baptisms, including my own, but I knew Pastor Litka from his own children at school, and I felt very much at ease with him. My mother brought me to see him one day after school, and he offered me a few cookies on a lamb-shaped plate, a glass of milk. It was just Pastor Litka and me and the stale air of his office. We talked about school and hobbies and whether or not I trusted Christ. I figured the answer to that had to be yes, to avoid a lecture. At some point, I saw that the red-headed man was sitting in the room, not with us exactly, but in a wingback chair to the side. I had seen him a number of times before. Once, when my parents were having a barbecue, he'd come through the back gate and blended easily into the gathering. No one said hello or noticed him, but he came to where I was swinging on the swing set and pushed me in the swing very hard and far too high. My mother shrieked, and one of the men quickly placed himself to catch me when the swing swooped back. I was giggling about my moment of danger and how it stopped the party, even though it scared me as well. When my mother came to scold me at how high I had gone, I told her that the redheaded man had given me an extra hard push, but there was no redheaded man anywhere to be seen. The guests looked among themselves and laughed at the impossibility of a crop of red hair among us. I didn't laugh because I knew more than they did. I had also seen the red-headed man when I was alone in an aisle in the supermarket. He appeared to be studying the different cereals and then looked at me very meaningfully and tipped his hat. My mother called me, and again, he was gone. I also saw him twice walking home when I had stayed after school for piano lessons, and no one was on the street going home except him and me. He always kept a distance and then would turn or disappear when an adult came along. The red-headed man was a nice-looking man, always in a black suit that seemed to be a little small and uncomfortable, a white shirt with a collar that was confining, and a black hat. I assumed that he lived somewhere in town, was harmless, and our meetings were accidental. But now that he was here in the office with the minister and me, I thought that perhaps he was Pastor Litka's friend or worked for the church. Of course, that explained his suit. Maybe he was a religious man too. Your mother tells me that you have a special friend, Pastor Litka said, without looking at me directly. I knew that adults only looked away when something made them uneasy. I thought he meant my friend, Julie Fletcher, and started to describe her, but Pastor Litka interrupted me. No, Laurel, I mean the red-headed man. Isn't there a red-headed man that you consider? I looked to the red-headed man sitting just behind the pastor. He smiled and put his finger to his lips as if to say, "This is our secret." I remember working my lower lip with my teeth, trying to figure out what to say next. I sensed that if I told Pastor Litka about the red-headed man, I would be in some kind of trouble, and I could hear my mother being hysterical, as she was sometimes about things that didn't matter. So I told the pastor that the red-headed man was an imaginary friend. Pastor Litka really was a kind man. He wasn't looking to shame anyone, and he understood children having four of his own. He smiled and asked me to tell him about my imaginary friend. I made up a few wonderful characteristics to portray the red-headed man as a protector, looking out for me when I was alone. I wanted my mother to feel that I was safe and being watched out for. The pastor nodded, and in 5 minutes, he believed he had convinced me to look to Jesus. I went along with that, all the time remembering my father talking about religion as hogwash on bright Sunday mornings. My mother was light and cheerful that night, spooning out her gluey tuna noodle and frozen pea casserole, and I figured that the pastor had reassured her that there was nothing exceptional about me. Meanwhile, I had learned that the red-headed man was my special secret, not to share with anyone, or I'd have to spend an hour with Pastor Litka again, when I would rather be home reading Nancy Drew. The red-headed man visited me several times a year up through high school. Once it was while I was getting into my clothes for school, about 17, and I turned and found him sitting at my desk, and his eyes went up and down my body. I cried out in alarm, and he turned to nothing, like he'd stepped into a narrow slit in reality. I'd overheard girls talking in the locker room, saying that being Catholic was more powerful than being Protestant because you could call on a saint or the Virgin Mary to protect you. I knew there was a convent in town, and it had a gift shop with all kinds of religious paraphernalia. I mentioned to the nun behind the cash register that I had a friend who was Catholic, who believed that she was being watched by an evil spirit, and clearly relished this sort of conversation, and took 20 minutes to make several recommendations, embellishing the colorful histories of the saints. I put the St. Benedict medal on once the church was out of sight, and did not see the red-headed man again until I was 22 years old, and supposedly on my way to Spain, and uncharacteristically had forgotten the medal in my haste.
So this is my first book, Yours Purple Gallinal, and it's an outcome of COVID times and sabbatical, which converged. So I studied backyard birds, and I read DSM-5. So I have a persona of a psychiatrist who diagnoses and misdiagnoses birds. I have personas of birds, and I have a persona of a poet and some other poems. So I will give you a sort of, in a nutshell, sample of all of them. So the first opening poem actually is a tribute to Len Howard, a British woman who during the Second World War secluded herself with birds, titmice, and that's actually what I most often saw on my deck during my sabbatical. So this is the tribute to her. A baby titmouse is tucking itself under my elbow, its beak ajar to let out a tiny snore. I remove it gently. I need to type notes from my session with the Himalayan griffon, but it resists and tucks itself under my chin. I keep writing with my head bent to the right, which makes my notes rhythmic. Other tits arrive. They scatter the paper, attacking the ink bottles with beaks. I keep stashes of cheese and nuts in my drawer. 3 tits adopt a skidding approach. The breeze of giddy wings flutters my pages, and for a split second, paper birds join the game. They are fascinated by the law of gravity and they push the pencils from my desk. I see curiosity in their eyes, a tiny winged idea. Why do these long creatures dressed as trees and metallic tails not take off? They pierce the pencils to see if they will rise. They don't. Tired of the gravity game, they outstretch their wings on the part of the paper where the sun falls. They lie now flat on their breast with beaks half open, sunbathing. I decide to nap. They notice the change of my position and move to my pillow to slide down on their butts with their legs outstretched. I get back to my desk and open my drawer with cheese. One tit gets hold of a cheese morsel first. The others chase him. They swarm and squeak and emit swear notes. Flames in their eyes, ruffled feathers, tits on the floor now, feet overlocked, rolling around, shrill notes, feathers flying. And I also actually read about exotic or extreme birds. This is one of my sources. And let's say there are characters such as marabou stork, apparently one of the ugliest birds in the world, which defecates on its feet and attacks pretty flamingos. And another of the characters is an interesting bird, flightless bird that you can encounter in the New Guinea, southern cassowary, which actually is considered one of the most dangerous birds. It's renowned for stabbing and disemboweling tourists. So I'm going to read the one of the diagnosis poems, and the character is southern cassowary, and I wanted to draw your attention to the illustrations by Nancy Sipi, who also did the cover. Tiny throat diagnosis. Southern cassowary, you arrive when your feathers are tinged with spurs. I must decipher your ventriloquist booms. Your body shudders and you complain about the anticonvulsants they put you on. Well, you slapped your spouse and you attacked the village doctor. Never mind, your spouse is obsessed with hand sanitizer. You kick doors and windows, self-hate. You attack your reflection. Yet some villagers will trade you for a wife. The village council suggests I dissect your cranium. I tell them claw boxing can bring birds closer. I prescribe Leibnizian metaphysics, Augustine's Confessions, and bromine. And back to backyard birds, I also learned to appreciate sparrows more, and I do think they are highly underrated. So this is another tiny throat diagnosis poem with a sparrow as a character. A sparrow tired of being a sparrow, the injustices mount, little brown jobs, ubiquitous and invisible, always the same seed. Humans don't even bother to use their binoculars. Would anyone even please be able to notice that there are the Bachman sparrow, grasshopper sparrow, sharp-tailed sparrow, seaside sparrow, lark sparrow, olive sparrow, sage sparrow, chipping sparrow, clay-colored sparrow, fox sparrow, savannah sparrow, and vesper sparrow. With such names, the sparrow could be a prophet. Then to her the songship, the twirl, the covenants would belong. Venerable Bede, in his ecclesiastical history of the English people, says the soul is a sparrow that passes through the hall of a king. Or she could be the queen of kinkiness, just like a saltmarsh sparrow, each of her eggs in a nest with different DNA. She could be a powerful aphrodisiac. Nymphomaniac witches disguise themselves as sparrows. In the meantime, I'm giving her a short test. I'm sprinkling crumbs. Do you swing on branches? Do you feel A, little to no interest in flying. B, guilt. C, lack of preference for lard. D, aversion to singing. E, desire to fly into glass windows. Do you prefer being called a slut, William Carlos Williams, a sad sparrow, cliché, a pet of courtesans, Greeks, an amorous sparrow, Elizabeth Bishop? Let's look at what you eat. What feeders do you frequent? It's a sunflower oil deficiency. I prescribe turmeric, which helps with inflammation. I prescribe Wordsworth, who wrote, "Man's life is like a sparrow, mighty king." But said sparrow, first read Catullus, in which a girl keeps you tenderly on her lap. And I also have a section of poems, nonfiction really pieces, which contextualize the culture of mental health across history. They are called mental aviary notes. I'll just read one of them. Notes from the mental aviary. Hildegard of Bingen, a medieval Benedictine visionary, equates black bile with Adam and Eve's sin. The apple brought on melancholia, a demonic origin. Hildegard states, "This black bile is dark and bitter and spews out every evil, sometimes even causing an infirmity of the brain. Human beings can feel no joy about the heavenly life and can take no comfort in their present life. The demons hurry to this painful affliction, as madness is one of their tasks." Hildegard recommends eating the liver of ostrich to cure melancholia. And I'll close with a more personal poem dedicated to my dad, but also maybe to other fathers like Ken, whom I consider my one of the literary fathers, and I hope he's here with us. And that's when my dad visited US, and I have to say that currently he doesn't recognize me. It's on and off. So it's particularly meaningful to me. Acts of exile. My 80-year-old dad visits from his native country. The Global Cafe Club I run at the college is having a belly dancing workshop. There is a table with some soda and chips for the workshop guests. The workshop begins and my father positions himself in an armchair far in the corner with a bowl full of chips. It is the first time I am taking a belly dancing workshop. It is his first encounter with chips. The chips, a symbol of the rotten West, were inaccessible during the communist regime. After the regime collapsed, they were one of the most expensive imports on Polish shelves. I bent the knee to drop the hip and straighten the knee to lift the hip again and again. My dad in his corner lifts each chip to his mouth and crunches over and over. Not unlike a burlesque show, we each indulge in the forbidden. The belly dancing coach says, "Imagine you have your arms full of groceries and you push the car door shut with your hip." I recall my dad getting lost years ago, his first time in an American supermarket. I imagine him hiding there until they closed the shop, wandering between the aisles and snacking from every possible shelf. Now he's my only child in the corner of the room, an empty bowl in his hands. Later that day, he will tell me he's not hungry and won't have dinner. The closer you are to the ground, the easier it will be for you to find the balance, the coach says. How we both try. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ava. That was delightful.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Daniela Naomi Molnar. Y'all show some love in the chat for Ava and coming up for Daniela.
Thank you. I'm so thankful to be reading today, and want to thank Omnidawn and Rusty and Laura and Ken, who I worked with very briefly, and grateful to have done so. And I also want to thank Kazim Ali, who selected my manuscript to win Omnidawn's second book prize. So this is the first time I've read ever from an actual physical book of mine. And I gotta say, I've gotten busy earmarking, dog-earing the pages. I've always kind of looked with a hint of jealousy at readers, poetry readers who had their books in their hands, and I always had loose papers. So I have a book. So I'm gonna read, the book spans from my home in Portland, Oregon to a remote canyon in New Mexico. And then it goes back to Portland. And I'll see how I'm doing with time, but I'll try to read a little bit from each of those parts. Chorus 4, Elsewise. If I can look this morning at my eyes, what does the rest, elsewise, have to do? Metronome beat of rain in drain pipe, creamy dogwood brats pointing all 4 directions. Morning dove, morning in the zinc bright rain, a heron flies to the city's last swamp. I've noticed how many good hearts have to stop to keep me clothed and fed. I've noticed the calluses on other hands, the splinters in paw pads, the burrs and black feathers that elsewise ought to fly. Weighted ends of the baton filled with viscous glitter gel that I used to twirl up and down the hot driveway, a march, a weft to weave the spinning. Where's the baton now? Cracked plastic glitter gel oozes into ocean floor or smears into chemical heat in some foreign dump where brown children I'll never elsewise meet walk orbits for what might pay, what might clothe and feed. I've noticed chatty atoms can sustain or kill, and there seems to be no will involved, no ethics or polarity, no gauge. I've no grip on that war. So far today, I've noticed how a nation can turn its weapons on itself, like I could choose to crush my toe bones to dust or hole punch my eyes just by looking. Standing in the kitchen eating toast, I tell myself I'm harmless. I only want what I don't have. So I'll read chorus 13 now. They're all called chorus, and now we're in Ojito Canyon in New Mexico. Chorus 13, Ojito Canyon, scene. Past moonset, free sunrise, stars poised on dark hills. Alone yesterday on a mesa, eating handfuls of thirsty snow, juniper parched and seeking, a water ghost, a slow writhing thing, engraving water's name, a continuous seeking eye. Pink wisps now in pale cerulean sky, hills indigo and umber. This white far, this breath, this blue far, this breathing, this pink far, this breath, this black far, this edge, this gray far, this lip, this fold of each body, a map of contact, of relinquishment and hold. I drift out from the canyon's inlet, trace again the world with sight. I try to see my own edges, trace where I become all else, to feel the me and the not me align in that reprise, as when an otherwise opens in the body, I split along the seam of my own perfect damage. Like a rock in a riverbed cracked by water's scrutiny, water's dash, water's deletions, its radical excisions, its unsealing, its tunneling, its certain tongue, water's irregular questions, water's habitable script. Water's eyes reeling, water's eyes contriving, bewildered, this slender breakage and drift. Glimpses are signatures, the ghosts live me. The flag in the valley maps the wind, like my eyes map the seam of me moving. I was taught to sew seams in a second-story room, the smallest in the house, in a brownstone in Queens. Running my fingertips along the skeins of embroidery thread again and again to feel their silky colors touch my skin, listening to the spin of the black iron sewing machine spinning, spinning, and the closet with its torn plastic bags of fabric scraps, all potentials, no plan, just belief. My grandmother's beaten hands guiding the machine that would join or sunder, that could script a strong, pliant unity of two separate things, or could tear into a hand, that could patch or puncture and must puncture in order to patch. No seam without the 1,000 tiny holes to hold the thread. The black thread, the white thread, the red thread, the green, tan, brown, violet, yellow, pink, the blue thread, the pale blue, the dark blue, thread to match the fabric it remade, stitches meant to be unseen. And unlike the stitches in a wound which vanish into skin's inherent holding, these stitches stayed, binding matter to itself, making folded form, to clothe and warm a body, to contain. That poem reminds me to say thank you to my parents, who I think are here, because I was talking about my grandmother, one of my grandmothers in that poem. And I was also sewing bookmarks yesterday, which sounds like an odd thing to do, but I have a show in the Bay Area in Oakland. I'm also a visual artist, and I have a show of paintings also called Chorus, for which there are bookmarks and books. So you're invited to see that. I'll put information in the chat. I think I'll read one more. It's Chorus 21, Ojito Canyon, Storm. I dream of my friend on his island, his view of the ocean's heft, origin whipped wind, touchable, unknown. He sees an upturned bell of water trying still to ring. His life moves into memory, all his paintings pressed with precision into storage space. Morning sky like an absent-minded, gentle touch. The clouds' pink fingers trace the sky's blue back, driven by a soft motor other than a mind. Yesterday, 2 signs on my hike will flood without warning. Are we ever warned of the flood? Do we ever know what is overtaking us or when we'll be overtaken? Preceding that, all within is protected. Every man, every woman carries a firmament inside, and the stars in it are not the stars in the sky. All within is protected, tunneling through entropy like memory of the Lincoln Tunnel. Orange sodium lights every 23 feet, traffic unmoving as always, horns, a jut of citizenry below the water's weight. I wonder about air, scarcity of. I wonder about bombs, about heat sensors and checkpoints and skin color and skin, inside skin of lungs, formerly pink, caked with exhaust and mold, lungs suspended between states, New Jersey, New York, water, air, real below dream, below dream, below dream. Every passenger in every car, a separate anxious language. Every idling car carrying within an expectation of arrival and awareness that arrival will continue to recede. No one wants to catch anyone else's eyes through the auto glass, though we sit, unmoving, close enough to touch, captive in a woven cove of ordinary strange. A fragile imaginal cloth holds the tunnel down, holds us all as traffic. Traffic, to touch repeatedly, to break. A fragile imaginal cloth holds us, unbudging chasms, full of desire to be not present, to be not visible, to be not seen through the auto glass, binary ratcheting up. Everything arrives energetically at first. I keep finding songbirds' rumps, tail feathers dusted red, wing feathers spread, what flesh there is eaten or rearrayed by time. The storm brought the songbirds down. The songbird is and is not a metaphor. The songbird is and is not gone. To feel is to give oneself over to matter's metaphor, to relinquish doubt's spin for a spell. I feel a bird on a power line look down at me. Another storm approaches like a cougar threading through rock, dis or reappearing when and how she decides. The songbirds brought down the storm. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daniela. And that was so powerful. Congratulations on your first book. It's such an honor to host your first reading from it. Y'all show some love for Daniela in the chat. And next up is Julie Carr. Make some noise for Julie, guys. Julie, I think you're unmuted. Sorry.
Yeah, I was. Sorry. Anyway, hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. And thanks to all the other readers and to Rusty and to Evan and to Ken in his absence. So this is a 100 Notes on Violence, and it's a republishing of a book that was published about a decade ago from Asada that has since closed. So I'm very grateful that this book will have a new life and a new cover designed by Jeffrey Petherbridge. I will say before I read that the book is called 100 Notes on Violence because it is about violence. So if that is not your thing, you might use this as a chance to step away. Okay. Starting with number 2. Salt on the land's low parts. You see it when the plains carry you into that nothing that loves you. Salt's pretty in the light now, prettier than trees. The beautiful boys and girls with their Velcroed shoes. And a man takes his key from his pants, scratches his initial into plexiglass, an A, like a house been condemned. He's 24 and done for. You know him from the news. He's got hay in his heart and did to them what I cannot write. Not in this, my number 3, a beginning. A. You, sweet compass, are about violence, which I can't. At the pool, the boy in camis reads an encyclopedia of weapons, Black Widow Custom AK-47 Johnson's Semi-Auto Colt 1937 Supermatch. His sister grins through water in her swimming class. B. I've been thinking about what I can't look at. School shootings, can't Google it, can't write it into the little space to see what comes up. I'd rather see that prostitute's ass as she bends over for the suicidal actor on TV. There's a mandala, a chess set, a Viking helmet, a parasol, a dog, a sugar daddy to stuff into the space from where the voice would emerge that says, nothing in this world is going to adhere to me. Not one thing will make one bit of difference. I am a free and unencumbered hand. 4, said the mama, I'm going to sing to you now with my profile, a song about fevers and towns. And the baby took the song to bed, wove it tight to make herself a walking bridge, a birdcage, a bride. Number 8. I pushed my face into the air beside the river. I broke that air with my face. My face was hard like an erection, and from my face, an emission of sound. It shattered that bit of cold air that was hanging there above the water like an irresponsible bird. Not caring for its own unity, it let me break it, let me even more ruin it. My face was not proud of this, not proud, nothing, just did it and kept walking. That broken, cold air fell behind me, soundless, because dead. 17. Never been to Texas, never been to Spain, never been to Holland, never been to Maine. All you babies with your orbs like planets hung in space. With your mouths around your feet, you crawl into my face. 31. And here I must add the part about the wait longer. Capitol Hill rapist. We heard about it when we got here from many different people. He'd walk into houses in the middle of the day and rape whomever he found there, men and women, boys and girls. Only yesterday did someone tell us he stabbed them too. One boy we know, now 8, then 5, saw a woman run naked from a house, screaming and bleeding. She died on the street. His parents said she had an owie and she fell down. 32. The useless mother's face is green, like a blade of cut grass sticks to your foot. Her face, cold, candid, flat, like a credit card, that empty. 42, 2 narrative poems. Stephen cut a grid into his shoulder. This he did not explain by telling me that his uncle once grabbed him by the hair and shoved his face into a full toilet. This same uncle was later found dead on the bottom of a motorboat floating in a pond with a girly magazine and a gun. Stephen and I swinging in a playground at night, feet swooping up toward branches, gray against the black of the sky. I found the grid sexy, but of course I did. Also, the uncle raped him. This I forgot to say. Various ways of writing that, but also the uncle, and the uncle. He raped him. The uncle said he raped him, swung on the swings, said stoned. My uncle, we have the same birthday. He put headphones on my ears, pressed play. Madame Butterfly, Shostakovich. I had not heard such music. A boy sat in my office, speaking of poems, his interest in graduate school. We were having the pleasantest conversation imaginable. My office is nothing special, but outside there are blooming trees and lilacs. Then I notice his hands, burn marks, perfectly round, fresh and red, 7 or 8 per hand. Perhaps he sees me notice, places his hands in his lap. We continue to talk over the burns, above the burns. 44, cold and grand, fresh and red. Currently, 9 women on death row. 369 men on death row. In Texas. Creator, shall I bloom? The women on death row have murdered, in most cases, children, in most cases, their own. The men have murdered, in most cases, women. 49, Roth, Cain and Abel. The oldest son was wroth, his countenance fell. He became a fugitive and a vagabond on earth, going to and fro upon the earth, walking up and down it. Out of the earth's open mouth, a bulb set to Creator, shall I bloom? Says Tim, right, your life strewn with dead bodies, all those bleeding in the street. But I say, violence is everywhere. Everywhere, he answers, right. The ordinary food, paper, tape, the face of a dog, mums, just blanketing. We were sitting on a porch. Our kids and our friends' kids running in and out of the house. Early fall, still green. A man and a woman approached, ordinary clothes, but they were wearing rubber gloves. Hello? Hi. Have you seen a body? They asked this. In a garbage bag? Of course, we stared at them, didn't know that we'd heard right. Then we noticed other people walking the street, crossing the avenue, rubber gloves. She is known to be in a garbage bag, 3 years old. They are parting bushes, peering into dumpsters. Go away, the children, in and out of the house, Ben and Alice, Kat and Marina, Joe and Henry, go away, and the baby in her stroller, sleeping. 50. My son is wroth. Dear summer, dear aging, the bottoms of cups. If bearing children is a game one plays with fate and is a joke, trees as yet unleaved, a sunny. My son is wroth, my daughter too, and me, myself, I am wroth, a fugitive on the earth and a vagabond. Dear opposition, dear trashed stroller, dear torn to pieces, wasn't, won't be, isn't me, collecting swords, hanging them on my living room wall. That's my neighbor. He's recording God songs for the radio, suited up for the long red night in the God studio, their ordinary clothes, their rubber gloves. Have you seen a body? Have you seen one? Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. That was incredible. And kudos to Omnidawn for giving 100 Notes on Violence another edition. You all show some love for Julie in the chat. Next up, we have Peter Burghardt. Keep it going for Peter, you guys.
Hey, everyone. Really nice to be here. Thank you to all the other readers and especially to Rusty and the Spirit of Ken. I'm going to be reading from No Subject, which is taking its title sort of from those emails that get sent when there's no subject line there at all. The reason for that is most of these poems were written kind of in these, I guess, in the moments in the day. The book was composed over the last 5 years, so partly during the pandemic, partly not. I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, and so some of it was around the time when things were getting really busy, preparing for family life and things like that, and some of it wasn't. And so just the opportunity to kind of, I think, contain the daily in these little poems that would be crafted in about an hour and then later revised. It was a real pleasure to work with Rusty on that. So I'm going to read some of them. No subject. You got old enough to recall the shape of what you couldn't remember. When have I not slept with my bed pressed to the wall? Any perforation is torn by the benefit of space between matter. Expressing this to you, the root of my palm moves in space to what I perceive as an up-facing position. I'm driving stick across Atlanta limits. It's never easy to see a house's number when you are looking from the street, but somehow I am at home. Here, there is a stake in the ground from which a line leads to a collar. It's called a run, and it rattles in the wind. Continuosity is a word I just made up, and time will not undo that. Nothing is ever undone, but one time I fell in a hole in the tall grass of my front yard. I showed you where it was, and you had me answer, how far down does it go? I said, I'm glad it's not deeper. I'm wearing my boots again and intend to have them resoled. The baby is nearly ready for his first pair. No subject. What is the point? I ask out loud. The form of the question itself an emptying into space from a place that can't offer any scrutiny. The negative of a small geometric painting my friend gave me, and I hung behind me on the dining table. 5 black squares on gray paneling, quite possibly a kitten's face, though my friend later adopted a puppy that is lovable and badly behaved in a gentle sort of way. I often felt badly behaved, though it's lesser with age. Exercise, discipline, and praise in that order. My own dog's trainer told me to focus. I stare at the monitor with too many windows open, alongside the thought that maybe I can't do a task that would only take 2 minutes. I'm thirsty, eating my child's goldfish crackers, calling my wife to see what time she'll be done. The sky slightly darkens through the January fringe, seems almost loomed and hungry for the smallest plate of light it might reflect and I might utilize to find the peephole of my own front door. Squinting through it with hands pressed up through my fingers and toes are numb, though my fingers and toes are numb from some form of exposure that comes no matter how long I keep myself inside and waiting. Three, no subject. People across the world settle in extremes. Places where the ground is so hot, you need double-layered leather-lined shoes, or where if you get drunk enough, you'll freeze to death. The best technology sent to Mars isn't meant to return. An architect says there is not a single building that will never collapse. He says, on Earth, bridges are what last the longest, holding ruin in the world until there is supernova, which isn't to say it's a bad thing. It's not like I can change the channel anyhow. As an American, the camera is always on. I waste too much time trying to figure out how I look. The best trend is always a change or a return, settling into reruns and knowing what they're not. But didn't I realize that? Expansion isn't limitless, and you can't choose something into truth like you can into concept. No subject. There is no left to say. No book to rip a page from and fold into the creek's cool stream, through the green particulate toward no inlet, no place to outpour into and lay with the weight of big water, over you, looking upward toward no sky, no brim for this world, no moon in orbit past yourself, no knowledge of the natural satellite itself, as no good for material and your not yet realized clutch of words not yet born nor unborn, in an act of what you feel not quite as blame, excuse, just the feeling of one blue life and another passing rabbit outside your window, eating a spring tulip, as you wonder what's not wrong with this question. Potential of a brain with too many creases, folding over on themselves to shrink the surface area with each tuck. No drive to amalgamate. Instead, just like cutting a pizza in half and 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 in half, 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 and in half just some atomic trace as the lingering ghost of a pepperoni. No subject. My friend, I'm sorry, distance is the ballad my guitar has been waiting for, maybe begging this tune to come. Stupid as my fingers are not practice bound, under an outside night's half sheath, which I thought I'd shared some vibration or opportunity in a calamity, but it was untrue. Like most self-whispers I can't take back. My car is going over 100 miles per hour. Doesn't make the long highway any shorter. The still watching police cruiser, biding its time against the tide of the bay's high lonesome, plays its bellowing accordion. But for the rowing of breath, I sustain what I take with me, out into the place I call the world, and the world calls the weather, the hope of a moment that stands apart from its birth. This is a holiday poem. We just got through the holiday, so I thought I'd throw a Christmas poem in. I think I might have another holiday reference in here somewhere, but got to keep it seasonal. No subject. There's a storm about an hour south, white out. Myself at the reins, even short jaunts between hosts get slippery. I range the longer gaps on snow tires, keeping low my gut's thoughts. I suppose I've put this distance in before, but not for mass, not as a formal half. When we collect, it's a new vocabulary of blood, spoken between cooking shows. We walk to a park through a land that barely qualifies as anything else. It's actually comfortable to see myself learn stillness. If I weren't, where would I go? At the evening service, the answer is simple. The priest stands afore a darkened fenestella. Teenage girls in Gothic makeup approach with a baby that is real, the nativity. No subject. Once more, following the encore of another idea slipped into caffeine and sliding in the way I've learned my senses run, entangled with held breath, waiting for the next self-acceptance, which would be a superpower were it what I possessed. Instead, my Chris's quickness and adaptation just surface enough to blend my inner ableist above he who paced his yard with a screwdriver, not knowing how to secure his valley shadow so it stays below those peaks that whisper, trust me, like a friend you don't know well enough to say they'll answer the call you place when you realize the remedy carried its own consequence, as you now carry your son to daycare in shoes he's learning to wear wordlessly. And what now will you do remembering your own? Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. It's such a pleasure to see you and to hear you read some poems for us. Y'all show some love for Peter in the chat. And next up, we have Sawako Nakayasu. Y'all show some love for Sawako in the chat.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thanks to everybody who has read for your incredible readings. I just want to send my deepest, biggest thanks to Rusty and Ken and Laura and everyone at Omnidawn for this book that I'm so pleased to have made together. I think it's been decades that Rusty and I have been wanting to make a book together, and it feels like it finally came true. And it's been a journey, and I'm happy to be here. It's one long poem, so it's a little bit funky to read from it, but I've found a way. It's in 3 parts. A, B, and A prime are the 3 parts, and each Each part has 8 numbered sections that get successively longer. So what I'm going to do is to read the first 5 sections of each of the 3, and then I'll go back and read the 7th section from part B. I also want to give my shout out to Naomi Kawanishi-Reyes, whose art is on the cover. You can see a bigger piece of it here. It's actually a painting that's much bigger, a painting collage work. And here we go, Pink Waves. A. 1. It was a wave all along. 2. It was a wave all along. A passing moment reveals itself to have cued the long apology. 3. It was a wave all along, sliding between the heat of now and surrender. A passing moment reveals itself to have cued the long apology. I sat with a friend and the loss of her child. 4. It was a wave all along. A passing moment reveals itself to have cued the long apology. I sat with a friend and the loss of her child, sliding between the heat of now and surrender. And then somebody holds your wild you closer to the range. The specs of a body don't reveal what it means, so which body do you want to wear today? The extent that we need another dollar. 5. It was a wave all along. A passing moment reveals itself to have cued the long apology. The extent that we need another dollar. It's haptic, it's your membrane, sliding between the heat of now and surrender. And then somebody holds your wild you. Which parts available for naming? Atop a sharp manicured nail. A quiet neck is often mismeasured as discomfort, which is indifferent to the noise of the world. The desk is positioned at the wrong height. Emails insert pointed arrows to indicate previous utterance in a moment of refrain. The desk is a spatial deadline, replacing a hip. She was an elegy function. She happened at once. She pitched. So did I love. These goals are a great carrier of stillness. Part B. 1. Snap. 2. Was that you or the genre trouble? 3. No and no. Dorsal recumbent, transit light, egression, delay. 4. Dissipate this, occasional light, stranger into self, nothing in reserve. Does it connect? Can you warfare connect it? Is it ceremony enough? Delivered light, language world. 5. Is it too infectious? Breathing en masse. Facts of a bandwidth. Material authorial clutter. Flesh and stargazing hoax. Adam Goloski is going away. Is this the right thought experiment? Are you breathing or are you myopic? Substrata, substrata. No end to the territory. Closer to capitulation. Stigmata, big stigmata. Proximity to falsification. A hipper replacement. Geometry of affect. It was hardly a pleasure. This is A'. 1. It was a wave. Would I snap? 2. It was a wave. Would I snap? Was it you? Or was it a passing moment of genre trouble, long bewildered? 3. It was a wave. Would I snap? Was it you? Sliding between the heat of no and no dislocation. A gasping moment of trouble caught in the bright light, of delay and transitory and loss, hers and mine both. 4. It was a wave, one snapped, who blistered. Passing moment reveals itself to have extinguished the occasional light that turned stranger into child, sliding between ceremony and language light, world without cold, the specks of a body and the extent to which it delivers. 5. It was a wave, it was infectious. An occasional moment reveals nothing but a passing light, extent to which I breathe your facts. It's haptic, it's your membrane, it's material clatter, sliding between your stargazing hoax and flesh. And then somebody steals your wild you and names it after a sharp thought. A quiet neck is often indifferent to the mismeasured noise of the world. Substrata lower than the territory concedes. Sharp pointed arrows indicate the lack of an end. Simulated spatial deadline. A hip, stigmata, shake. She was a threnody hit. She happened. She pitched. I did love it. Geometry of pleasure. Next is section 7 from part B. This is kind of in the middle of the book. I'm going to read about half of this section. 7. Betweenness as an overarching capacity. That is to say, my bidding is never enough. This is a catastrophe. This is a broad claim. Invisible light, I hold it and slip it to you. Black data as written by Adam Pendleton. I need to articulate my suspicion of foul play. In the wake of accumulated war never ending, I want a person to drown in or mirror my laughter. Intervention is requested but unfulfilled. Dancing in a body that is inherently threatening. Better able to launch a path towards comfort. I don't need any more inhabitants to my body. Risk of being misread, maligned, and left behind. I steal crumbs from your mouth to bake my own bread. I do not need to own it, the shimmer of completion. Somebody walks in carrying a clear jar of silence. Did you know I have a nice kick and the sky is blue? Those who are most shy discover themselves in performance. Noble future light celebrating the reinvention of everybody. Ich sterbe versus you just lost me when people go away. What is the 1960s hanging from the hot bosom of the 2010s? Erica Hunt's poetry is rehearsal for alternative worlds. I need a constant morning, a kick in my mouth and coffee. When I was willing to wait 30 minutes, 2 hours, 10 years for you. Conceptual artists do not hold hands. They do not have hands, not in that way. Seemingly large beauty or glitter or the dark whip of power. The unjust occasion for this book is not typical, but it scorches just the same. Conceptual artists do not make faces. They do not have feelings, not in that way. The particularities of this injustice call for a revenge full of love. I can feel it. Yes, you can. I remind myself not to make assumptions about the owner of the silence versus the owner of the jar. In 1970, Irina Dunn scrawled, "A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle on a bathroom door." In the late 1960s, Valerie Solanas and Solowitz sat down in New York to write manifestos, while others feared for their lives because of their manifestations. Language poets put their politics and aesthetics and wrested power from the establishment, but it's up to their offspring to take that power to the intersection. That ringing sound you hear is the ordinary wait time until the swelling in your ear resumes its banal pressures, keeping with the patterns of the infectious edges of the body. Thank you.
Thank you, Salako. That was very provocative reading. Thank you so much. Y'all show some love for Salako in the chat. And closing us out today is TJ Anderson III. Show some love for TJ, you guys.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be reading with some wonderful writers and to be a part of the Omnidawn family. Deep, deep gratitude to Ken and to Rusty and to Laura for putting forth our work. Particularly, they published one of my early books, Devante Travels the Sorry Route. So I'm really happy to have There It Is published by them. And I'm going to read a few poems from There It Is, 3 today. His first poem is called The Porch Sweepers, and it begins with an epigraph by Arayame. This world here is a blessed and dangerous place. Who are those people who step out each morning with broom to front porch, sweeping away the last remnants of night, gazing at either dark clouds or sun, shoeless or slippered, where the foot pulses wait on grieving floorboards, who hold in their grain the witness, the witless, the whiteness of what is human. Those former trees, those formal lives, those floating leaves, splintered, fractured, serrated from large forest where sharp-beaked birds perched and preened. The portrait is not pretty. The portrait is not petty. And this thing, this text, this tome, this taunter, this textile, this tactile, this tactful, this tenderloin, this turnkey, this turnip, this poem stalled and started off in celebration of the lone sweeper diligently dismantling cobwebs, hoping for an ever, a never, an evergreen, an epistle, an epoxy, an ember, a tomorrow of sunset-laced postcards and glowing suns who've stolen keys and driven off in bronco-busting cars towards fortresses and gutted mountains, main lies, main stains, municipalities, mockumentaries, motherfuckers, managerial, myopic, melatonin. And dear, dear Aunt Myrtle, who waited all this time at the beach for her tide to come in. And when it did, she realized that we are all a species of ravagers, groping our way through crystalline geodes who hold in their mouths the secret of Earth's golden embassy. This next poem I'm going to read is a 4-part poem, and it's called Site Specific, and I'll pause through each part of it. The measurements of cappuccino should be fluid like jazz. One starts with music, attention to clef, signature, tempo, and bridge, the opening up of space and the collective sigh of the downbeat. Hey, Sylvia, you set the table. Call it like you see it, as if you were corralling the kids in for dinner or the elders for a night of pinochle. 2, sitting on the mantle, this ornamental mug champions the history of my tribe. My uncle brought it back from Atlantic City, walking on the boardwalk with a wife that was not his own. Now it's a carapace for the froth of our arguments, my refusal to part with my mannish ways. A certain camisole of whipped sugar poised as surf, This drink evokes the satin plumes of paradise. Tell me, what was her name? 3. The view of Lonnie's tenement revels in splattered glass, busted street lights, rusted engine blocks, cracked graffiti on sidewalk streets. Whatever has been played out long ago, and the doorbells sound in minor keys, and a pigeon struts and dances in the carnage of lottery tickets. My God, Lonnie says, surveying his kingdom. The limbs that settle, orchestrated in the silica of heat. 4. Sylvia is from sea joints, specializing in hot air, pot or postage or portage or porridge, a ridge of teeth to latch to, part of a chance shanty, a song to the special rayon of mandibled ants in my uncle's basement. This here rest is molar, this be upward mobility, arrested sand, a gallant embassy of pines, an hour when the sculptors tumble their silhouettes from the sky. The temperature is brusque, is aquiline, is the hat check made in the leper leap who scores toes an angle worthy of chivalry and taking our orders. Counter of malfunctions, the key the bones play in the dog muzzle up to the lap, wins the top blue prize. Sylvia closes her vespers in whispers of night, while the poor frost puts a remedy of ills in the aurora of our throats. Don't sever fate. Tap the table that judges the dinner. Sylvia, take up your own horn. And the last poem I'm going to read is the title poem from There It Is. It's there and here it is simultaneously. Somebody once told me, trolled me, where there's a will, there's a way. That's what he said. And I got to thinking this Shakespeare thing has gone way too far. What kind of weight was he talking about? That's like being lassoed by a lariat of lyrics. My God, that was during the Trump years when people's hackles were up. Let me be clear, let me be Claire, let me be Clorox, let me be Celestial, let me be Corpus, let me be Chorus, let me be Cavalier, because that's the only currency I got. See, there is something, and he got all mixed up. See, there is some see, there was some shenanigans, something sinister afoot, and yet, the rhythm shifts in. And the soul gets to blazing, boom, and they say, who do the saying? Something in the rhythm that morphs this phantom body into a two-step dance between the legs of Papa Legba, holding his cane for me. I pour libations for him, and he greets me at the crossroads. My dance contains my own buck and wing, part goat, part eagle, with arms waving aloft. They could be appendages, they could be hard-handled knives. There's no need to offer an explanation to the folktale about Black people flying. There is scientific proof that they did. Eyewitness accounts reveal that people lifted up from the ground. One man reported seeing a yellow glow arising from the bottom of their feet. I looked up and saw one woman disappear into the clouds, was what he said. There is Snake Hips Tucker, Serpentine Swale, Cross Supper Club dance floors in the 1920s. That's got to remind you of the middle, the muddle, the middle, the muddle, the middle, the muddle, the middle, the muddle, the muddle, the middle, the muddle, the muddle, the middle, the muddle, the middle, muddle passage, passed out, passed down, passed on from one mouth to another, from palms that stun the skins, set them to singing true, seafaring, sea foraging, sea underwater, as in house, our body, but not articulated, complex, completed, blink, 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 dash, blink, 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 dash, dot, dot. At the Black and White Ball, Boston, 1980s, Guillermo shows up wearing a tux and a life vest. And Judy straddles up to him. Who you supposed to be, she says. I'm a man lost at sea. How can I help you? She whispers in his ear. You can't, I'm drowning, he replies. And all that reels into hauling goods, and that reels into being goods, and that reels into Hull's Caribbean Bound, and that reels into hush, little baby, don't you cry. The stars fell on Alabama last night. Ever heard of the Virginia Reel? Was it last night, night before, 24 robbers at my door? No, not Aladdin's 40 thieves, dank cave laden with fancy jewels, the genie at the entrance, entranced, emerald. Really? Is that the genie you dream of? She of the light brown hair? Genie, how casual and familiar you sound. The prescription is the trance. The prescription is the rhythm. The prescription is the trance. The medicine is the rhythm. The prescription is the trance. The prescription is the rhythm. The perception is the trance. The trance, the medicine, the protection that the drum calls up is the font, is the front, is the fount, is the funk, is the fury, is the fit, is the flirt, is the fet, is the foretold, is the tribal memory found, saying, come children, don't you get weary, let's laugh, let's weep, let's remember together. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, TJ. That was incredible reading. As always, what a collection of readings from today's authors. I'm going to go ahead and move into gallery so you can see everybody who read today and give them a round of applause from wherever you are. Thank you all so much for your readings, and thank you to everyone at Omnidawn, to Rusty and to Laura, and to Ken, of course. And I think I'm just want to say again that how proud Booksmith is to partner with Omnidawn and to help support these authors. I want to bring Rusty Morrison up, the beloved publisher, and a major inspiration to me, and I know to so many other people. Rusty, as always, it's lovely to see you, and thanks for being here with us.
I am so grateful to be here with Booksmith and Evan Karp. Evan, you do so much for us and continue to, and Booksmith as well, supporting and promoting marginalized and underrepresented people and energies in this culture that so much needs that. Thank you. And I want to thank all of the authors who've read today, which I'll name in alpha order by their last name: T.J. Anderson III, Peter Burghardt, Julie Carr, Eva Kruschel, Clyde Derrick, Sawako Nakayasu, Daniela, Naomi Molnar. Thank you. And of course, every excellent book is unlike any other. And these are each uniquely excellent in their own ways. But I will risk saying that they have a few things in common, and I will mention three from my perspective. First, each author in his, her, or their own way questions in both form and content the prevailing and limiting conventions of our times and our cultures. They're courageous in doing this. Second, each author uses surprising, captivating, mesmerizing language, which you have heard today, to demonstrate how their protagonists in the poem awaken themselves to the limitations that they had accepted, but are now seeing that they can abandon in order to live more choicefully, more freely than they had. And in this way, they offer to each of us who are readers the same opportunities to find new ways of perceiving our own limitations in our lives, and then to move beyond them if we choose. These books do this for us. And then third, I see each of these authors fully embrace and thereby reflect what I consider, what Laura considers, and what Ken did consider Omnidawn's ethos and mission, which is to publish work that explores what it means to step beyond the social and the personal, the external and internal boundaries that narrow our lives. These authors find in their writing the compassionate insight that allows them to create protagonists who take risks and in so doing thrill us with the opportunities that we may not have imagined. Thank you to all of you. And I also want to say it is a privilege for me to be co-publisher now with Laura Joachimson and to express how much I know that Laura and I miss Ken so very much, and that I know all of you do too. Ken and I asked Laura to take Ken's place as executive director once Ken saw that his cancer was incurable. Laura and I are continuing to do the work that Ken and I began in 2001. We understand that we must be intuitive decision makers with the guidance of our board, our advisory board, and our advisory board in order to renew and invigorate the press so as to stay in the forefront, or let me call it the continued dawning of what is most valuable in independent publishing. And we are so very lucky to have the critical work of volunteers and the work of those who receive small compensation, but who do so much more than those funds could possibly cover. I'll name them in alpha order by their last names: Sophia Carr, Rob Hendricks, Jeff Kingman, Jordan McKenzie, Jennifer Metzger, and Katie Tomzinski. And I want to acknowledge our poetry editors, who receive also a small stipend, but do so much more than that could possibly compensate. And their names are in Alpha 2, Jason Bayani, Anthony Cody, Liza Flum, Sharon Zetter, and Rob and Laura, who are also poetry editors, as am I. Thank you to all of you, to the authors, to Evan, to Booksmith, and we look forward to all that we can continue to do together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rusty. And I'll just conclude by saying, if you haven't gotten the books, it's not too late to order them from Booksmith. You can click through the link just beneath the video. Thank you all so much again for joining us. I hope that you all have a healthy and fruitful year, and to see you all again soon and often. And again, thank you to all the readers, and congratulations on your fabulous books.
And we look forward to the next Booksmith, which will be the next season. Thank you, Evan.
Of course, our pleasure. Have a good day, everybody.